All right. Well, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Esportian podcast. You know how we do it, right? We essentially bring a lot of experts in the space of university esports. A lot of the times, these people are directors in their field. We ask them about their strategy, their process, things they have coming up. Today, we're here with Mike Aguilar. He is the director of University of Oklahoma. Mike, how you doing?
Pretty good. First of all, thanks for having me. I'm doing great, man.
Awesome. And just to ask real fast, that's why I was looking up. I was curious. Do you prefer to go by Mike or Michael? Just in this case.
Mike Moog or Michael Moog. It's really what rolls off the tongue. And being Michael as well is kind of weird sometimes saying your own name. So Mike is just
Yeah,
a derivative is perfect.
Mike goes off well, right? Okay, awesome. No, man, it's good to have you here, especially with your experience in the space, man. What I really hope is, our audience a lot of times are new directors, people who want to see the process. So really learning from your strategy. I think a lot of the time we get opinions, but I think I would love to hear from your strategy because I think a lot of these questions we're going to ask, it's going to come. You're going to go from experience, right? So I'm excited to learn a little bit about that. Just for people tuning in, today's conversation is really going to be based off of recruitment and recruitment strategy. So first, really for those who don't know about you, I just want to give you a minute or two, or however long, just to introduce you, introduce your program, and I like to say this. I think more important, I would love to learn about you from a personal aspect, right?
Sure.
Anyone can go into your website and learn about what you're
Right.
competing through and what you're playing, right? Who are you and who is, right?
Right.
Your
Okay.
program. Go ahead.
Okay. So I'm going to start with just the program and I'll go back into how I got here just really quickly. So this is a 7+ year development that has started very similar to a lot of the first kind of grassroots energies that we saw in the scholastic space, regardless of, the K-12 sector or the collegiate sector, starting from an interest-based student org. I was a staff leader, though. That was a unique scenario where students were trying to get things going, but I came in and said, nope, let me just pull all those things together and get it started. And is now fully departmentalized as of 2020, 2021, piloted out of a student org into a full department. So it's living the dream. And the intention of that, which we'll dive into the questions obviously later, but was to really focus on community as the core with a menu that caters to everyone, meaning all gamers are welcome. And then through that, use it as a means to develop a mentality for path to industry, whatever their industries may be. So using gaming as the icebreaker. Now, on a personal level, I've been a gamer my whole life. To date myself for this video, I don't have any problems with it. I'm 41, almost 42 at the end of March. And I grew up in West Germany when the wall was still up in the 80s, to date myself. So Atari 2600, Apple IIe, NES, Sega Genesis, and then go on from there. So pretty much all of the modern consoles and even what we call now the retro classics. If the shot was wider, you'd see my Pong paddles and my translucent purple 64 controller and my original Xbox 360 controller and my consoles actually in the back shelves. But that entire time growing up in Europe, my mom wouldn't let my dad get sick. And so we'd go travel to see another country every other month. And that was critical, way more critical as I got into my 20s and 30s to understand the importance of that. One, being an American and service member, my dad obviously being a service member, that's why we're over there, but also me as a service member as well. And finding that balance between empathy and apathy and understanding inclusivity and proper diversity, because for all intents and purposes, a little brown boy growing up in Germany. So that provided a different perspective coming back to the States as a young kid and understanding that, there's just different culture and the way that we live in America is very different than other parts of the world. And that's a very good lesson to learn. The earlier, the better. And through that time, gaming, because of moving every 4 years in that timeline, naturally was hard to make friends long term. And so gaming became that thing for the family. And for us, the birth of Atari 2600, really, my brother and I would be playing. My brother's 10 years older than me. My sister's 9 years older than me. Parents would be on the couch reading Reader's Digest, mom's knitting or something like that. Sisters listening to, we're in the 80s, so Depeche Mode, The Cure, and that era. And then my brother and I playing video games on the Atari 2600, Pele Soccer, Star Wars, stuff like that. And so gaming from a very basic level and very early on in my timeline became kind of a centered nucleus component of that family that created some kind of commonality despite all of these wonderful kind of extracurriculars that we were doing being in overseas. My brother played in the minor leagues that fed into the Bundesliga in Germany. My sister was also all-state in soccer when we moved in Oklahoma. Boy Scouts, soccer, you name it. We did everything on top of church and other things that we did in community stuff to find, community. And so those things were really important to who I became. I also served in the military, enlisted 3 months before 9/11, which grew me up really, really fast. I was 19 years old. And then was also working for Apple at the end of the Steve Jobs era and life. And I was an Apple fanboy growing up before Apple was the thing to be a fanboy of, before the iPhone, before the iPod even. And so those things I always latched onto tech. I took apart my first computer when I was 9, so that would have been the early 90s. Grew up with the dial tones of a modem and the birth of broadband and the birth of BattleNet, which enabled multiplayer online for me for the first time in 98, 99 era. So all of those things. And then the other one that's kind of significant was I'm a photographer of 20 plus years, and I've shot every genre. You name it, from weddings to engagements to senior photos to newborns to last rites, documenting someone's life as they are on their way out, all of that, even funerals. And that also gives us a perspective in regards to understanding apathy and empathy and the human condition, and really kind of focusing on the beauty of life, but also its challenges. And so all of these things matter because when you talk about a bigger university that has 30,000, 24,000 undergrads, 30,000 student population, none of them are going to be the same, or a large portion of them will be different. So being able to relate to them, being able to break ice with them, being able to understand when to be quiet and listen, and then interject when there's a point that makes sense to provide feedback or an additional commentary on a certain thought process is key to not only active listening, but really bridging the gap between a Zennial, early, older millennial, and Gen Z, that's currently the prime of our student population. So that's who I am in a nutshell, as best I can summarize. And then obviously the program kind of top level intention, at least.
Yeah, and it's funny, you talk about this idea of like aging yourself, and it's kind of like it's this distant thing. And I think it's interesting. We're going to see in this interview, you bring a level of expertise that has nothing to do with being a game player, has nothing to do with being in esports, that I think is so important, and that's missing, right? I think it's great that we are in this ecosystem where you have young professionals becoming directors, right? But there is that some certain level of professionalism, right? And not that they can't do it, it's just you learn it. Anyone you understand that, right? It's something you learn through time. Does that make sense? And you talk about like my experiences with the military, my experiences with school, my experiences with traditional sports, right? When those individuals generally cross over, I think we need more of those individuals to be talking. Right. It's not that we only should have those individuals in the space, but we want to hear from them more. So I just want to add that, right, going into the conversation on recruitment, right? I think the best way to really start it off is understand your program, right? So I think really ask is how does your university's student recruitment stand out from other universities? And maybe you can start with just how you guys do recruitment in general, right? And that can be a good starting point.
I think to preface that, one of the biggest things when we talk about big state universities is they have an upper hand with certain things. And the biggest one is that anytime that you have a state university in the equation, by default, the state's K-12 graduating seniors typically have those schools on its short list of things to at least apply for, as at the very least their plan Bs. And so that is going to create not necessarily the lower caliber of potential student, but it's going to create a natural, organic, large population of interest without having to outwardly target. And I think that's one of the biggest benefits to the public universities, mainly because it allows us to diversify our programs because we have an abundance of students that have interest. Now, all of them will be, top tier in Overwatch, Valorant, and so forth, but maybe they understand analytics, maybe they understand production, maybe they understand event planning, or maybe they have a passion in those types of things. So really focusing on that path to industry mentality I referenced, and let me dive into that specific definition of that really quickly. Path to industry is meaning that I'm using gaming as a means to break ice. And if a student wants to be more than just a community member, then they can have different pathways to help build and fortify whatever they're going to study to become the best version of whatever they choose to become. So if they want to be a top level competitor, that would be our weakness. That would be the biggest weakness that we have as that pipeline, especially as the University of Oklahoma. We're going to compete. However, my eggs aren't in that basket quite yet because I'm focused so much more on the industry of the infrastructure of the industry that we are sorely seeing right now, hemorrhage jobs and hemorrhage positions. And the way to fix that is to start building more organizational leadership mindsets and understanding a little bit more risk management and understanding how to take calculated risks, how to understand how to fail and get back up, entrepreneurship, because all of this really is the start of new ideas still. And in the collegiate and the scholastic spaces, I still call this all 1.0. I still think that this is beta 1.0 iteration. We're not at 2.0 phase yet. When we start seeing national boards of conference, that are starting to form and they're starting to now form, that actually blanket the mass majority, then we're starting in 2.0, the age of governance, the age of normalcy, the age of having a rubric that can compare a school to another on level playing grounds or level playing terms. We're not there yet. We're defining that in real time. Every single institution, regardless of private, public, D1, T2, 3D, 3D, D3, or community colleges, are defining that right now by throwing the darts at the board and figuring out what works for their communities and with the topic.
Exactly.
So you fast forward that 10 years from now, and you will start creating, and not even 10 years sooner than that, but 10 years for sure, you will start creating a pipeline of professionals that do stabilize the industry so that they can make the right calculated risks, take the right innovation to the plate, understanding the balance between hitting the brakes and hitting the throttle. And really finding that kind of duality of keeping it exciting, but also keeping it conservative enough that you're not causing people to starve. You're not causing households to break. You're not causing people to be as close to homeless, if not homeless, because of bad decisions and bosses that make bad decisions. So with that being said, the recruitment energy is two different strokes. You have the internal recruitment that's organic, and you have the external recruitment that's targeted for performance goals. So performance goals for us, I'm going to start on that one because that's the easier one, honestly. Naturally, we have a lot of schools that are competing for top tier talent in the context of competitive energies. So for us at big universities, we don't have the weight on winning national championships yet. The same way that as a school like OU focuses on football and right now softball. Good luck, girls. Congrats, hopefully on another championship series for that softball team. But we're not there yet in regards to the culture of this university.
Yeah.
However, if we're not in athletics, the next culture that is the one that can align is the academic success, the scholarly activity, the career placements, the graduating students on times, the recruitment to the university in the context of whatever they're going to choose for workforce generation or industry stabilization or innovation into new areas, especially in the STEM tracks, medical fields, and so forth. So when we talk about recruiting high-tier talent, we're not talking about just recruiting a top-tier Valorant player. We are talking about recruiting students that can be future coaches, students that can be future analysts, on-air talents, journalists, documentarians, storytellers, those people, because those are the things. If people can't watch the Super Bowl, would we care about Taylor Swift right now as much? You know, no offense to the Taylor fans.
You said it.
No, nothing against her. I backtrack. I don't want to make any enemies. I enjoy Taylor Swift as well. But the point is that if you can't watch these things, if they're not published, if they're not produced, if they're not annotated, they're not documented, announced, or commentated on, you can't be a fan of them. It's hard to be a fan of them. What's going to inspire you to buy that jersey on the back? It's not going to be entirely me. It's going to be the students and the performance that they put on and the announcements of their performance in real time and the showcasing of who they are as individuals and as a team. So that infrastructure is so critical because that's where the money is. That's the whole reason schools like OU is moving into the most lucrative Power 5 SEC athletics conference here next year, is because of that visibility, that viewership, that a potential of reaching people that will spend the money or come out to the tailgates and have fan engagement. And in that context, a lot of people struggle, especially if you're more leaning towards the nerd geek side of things, to struggle with the parallels of drawing against athletics energies. And my problem with that is that sure, the cultures that the two topics cater to can be vastly different. However, there is crossover when we talk about sports titles, especially. But the business back end, why would I want to recreate the wheel when all I need to do is slap another piece of rubber on it? And so that's kind of where at a Power 5 D1, the mentality is different because the brand is notable. The brand has at least national penetration, if not some global areas because of the travel abroad programs and its scaling. So tap into those pre-existing revenue stream opportunities, tap into those pre-existing marketing and outreach opportunities, and leverage that 130-year-old plus alumni network as a means to advocate and to bring awareness of the evolution of grandparents who are absolutely contributing to the university, who bought their grandson an Xbox or V-Bucks in Fortnite or those types of things, and saying, hey, this can be another reason or another purpose for another generation of Sooners to go through your households. And so you can't, obviously we have to evolve with the times and education, just because especially public education has been riddled with the restraint and the restriction of lawmaking and policy, concerns and these types of things. Some good, some bad, not all exclusively one or the other, but the financial component's another aspect of that too. So when we talk about top tier talent, we're talking about all the things that OU already does well. We teach creative media production, which teaches live stream production, which could be just take it and plug it from the television network and plug it into a live interactive platform like Twitch. Same techniques in the classrooms, does not need a rebrand even. Just create an elective course or some elective courses that are teaching the Twitch side of things, interactive media, and OBS, but you're already learning good lighting technique, audio technique, vocal inclination, pacing, timing, emotional draw. You're understanding all those things already. So it doesn't have to be recreated. If you're in professional writing or journalism, you already know how to properly structure a captivating article, an opinion piece, to do fact checking, to do the proper research to tell that narrative. If you're already in marketing and advertising, you already understand the betterment or the better way to design graphics for catering to a specific audience. So again, those things don't have to be recreated. They just need to be tweaked a little bit. When we talk about the organic side, the other organic side of recruitment, the students that are naturally here, that are naturally gamers. And the last time I looked at the analytics, I think it was 2019, 2020, 65% of 18 to 29-year-olds in the United States play a video game of some sort, which is all of our undergraduate populations, so majority. For all traditional students, and even some that are untraditional in their 20s still. So that means that 65% of all of our students on campus play a video game. And if you can't find interesting students or interested students, then you're not speaking the right language. You're not listening. You're not reaching out. You're probably being a little too introverted with it. Go and knock on doors. Go and hang up flyers. Go and hang up those Q&A opportunities of open hour or open office hours, or a podcast or a panel, and invite the student population and the faculty and staff to come in and say, what do you think this is? And then, let's relearn what this actually is. And so you have students from all walks of life, whether that's socioeconomic backgrounds, their religious affiliation, their heritage backgrounds, or political affiliations, their extracurriculars that they had growing up, what they're studying, what they want to become. That does not create a barrier of entry at all into the program or the community. It creates pathways to grow it. So if you're in social work, it's probably one of my favorite ones. So social work on our community program has an opportunity of partnering with, we partnered with our police athletic league here in Oklahoma City. And so we partner with them to, one, provide mentorship and events for kids, which typically are those that are in lower socioeconomic demographics and minority demographics. And that is not only a philanthropic outreach of paying it forward and taking care of our front yard, but also helping social workers understand how to leverage new tools in an industry that is not for the faint of heart. And gaming is absolutely an opportunity to reduce the overhead of creating programs that can help keep kids off the street, or at least have the right mentorship in their head. Another example on things like social work or sociology is we partnered with our children's hospital. Naturally, those kids are just little kids. They got dealt an unfortunate card. If it's a serious, something is like cancer or some kind of deformity, or if it's as little as I broke a bone because I was playing on a playground. But their spirits can be uplifted, and their parents need breaks. And those nurses they try to uplift spirits, but are tending to the wounds more than anything. Well, there's a great opportunity to come in on a psychological level and distract them, which helps uplift their spirits, which helps them recover faster, or at the very least smile and laugh and remember what it's like to be a child again in that moment. So like those things are really, really cool opportunities. But what we're doing is we're instilling that what I believe we're doing is instilling that right balance between, you love gaming, you spend a lot of time on it. We're not going to talk about if it's a bad amount of time, but you're just going to spend a lot of time on it. Now let's leverage it as an opportunity to inspire you to do more and to become more if you choose to. Here are all the doors. Here's the doorknobs. Here's the key code to walk through them. And if you walk through it, we're on the other side waiting to help further accelerate and supercharge your path.
And I know we spent a little time on this subject, but for viewers, this is so important, right? This is very, very important, because at the end of the day, for these universities, the program is an investment, right? And if they're not seeing it as an investment, then they're not going to see it that way long. They're not going to be having their eyes on this program long. And what you're really talking about is you're just talking about honesty, right? And if a lot of these programs right now, a lot of these new directors are coming at it and seeing this as a competition program, right? And yeah, there are some success out of that, right? But for the ones who many of them, right, I'm sure you talk to probably more of these new directors than I do, they run into that wall as soon as they run into that, right? And it's how do you find that value, right? And I think this needs to be talked about more, right? So and it's not something you can quickly go over, right? So I just want to iterate the value of what this man just said in terms of how do you find value in your program in terms of the way that the university is going to reflect it, right? Because they're going to be asking questions, right? I really want to ask you, Summer, because at the end of the day, I really want to ask questions that I think a new director would see and want to ask. And one thing I would feel like, right, is the idea of technology and social media, especially with you who have found success, right? So tell me, elaborate on your role with using technology and social media in terms of recruitment. And I would love if you're specific, like how do you use Twitter, and how do you use different social media? Are you using it, right? Are you paying attention to what, and I think this is important too, and I love to ask this, are you paying attention to what the K-12 space is doing in terms of social media? Maybe, and I think maybe these K-12 programs need to hear from programs that like, hey, if you guys post on social media, we listen, we'll follow, right? Because I'm not seeing that connection on the K-12 side. So talk about your role of how important is social media to you in terms of recruitment.
Well, I think and we talk about outreach as a collective and social media specifically as a component of it. Naturally, if your director cares about it as a program has a mandate to recruit, which program doesn't. But again, everyone's different. Like for instance, most of the big division or public universities can't touch the tuition dollars of recruitment. So a private university, however, can oftentimes not, and I've seen that more. So they have a direct inflow of cash, whereas it'll take an act of Congress for me to touch the tuition dollar that comes into OU. So that also creates a different paradigm because that means that I need to fundraise my own money and exclusively versus the private universities who are often given a bigger budget internally because of the give and take nature of recruitment and graduation and being able to directly impact on something. And that's not universally true against all privates, but it has been a large portion of them that you get a chunk of that money to sustain their programs. So that fundamentally means that you do have to get creative. Now, I live in a state that unfortunately bans TikTok. Otherwise, I'd be all over TikTok. And really just allowing the students to be themselves in itself creates such a marketing thing. And one of the things when I talk about our streaming entertainment component, the building the individual platform brands, is that I don't want your streams to be polished from the very beginning. The University of Oklahoma, big universities are intimidating. The same reason that when you walk into a store, especially if you're an introvert or if you have social anxiety, you walk into anything that's busy, you're going to immediately be off put. Your batteries are going to immediately drain and you're going to want to go home and curl in a ball in the corner, get back on video games and go back into your sanctuary. So my best strategy into dealing with the demographic that I know are the core of things like the core of games like Valorant and League of Legends, the more fantasy-based titles tend to have the higher percentage of Steam STEM tracks and the higher percentage of those that have those social adversities. So the best way to overcome that is empower those students that are just like them to be the voice. And through that, create those opportunities to provide some media training so they can dial back a little bit of the dank and upscale a little bit more of the messaging with finding a good blend between trying to not be literally the boomer energy in the space that's literally just pandering to saying certain phrases versus literally empowering the students to just be themselves and say, this is the message I want to deliver. You translate it in your speech to reach your audiences. And by doing that, you're teaching our students as a means, which are just the K-12 students 2 years in advance. That's it. They're just the same exact students 2 years in the future, which is understanding them, teaching them to understand how the power of their own voice is a formidable weapon and a shield as well. The spotlight isn't scary when the spotlight is built for you. And through that, allows students to reach back into their own high schools, reach back into just a year ago, especially the freshmen that are entering their second semester who have learned a ton in the first 6 months of being away from home or now being in the next chapter. To go back and take those fresh memories and those fresh time differences and literally speak to people that they graduated with or graduated ahead of that they were in classes with or on teams together. And you tap into that very short window of opportunity to really boost my student side, but empower K-12 side to take more ownership of growing that sector. So social media isn't necessarily a context of saying, hey, let's put out a Twitter blast and we expect it to do it. First of all, Twitter, or X, formerly known as Twitter, still called Twitter, is really more about informational updates.
Yes.
That's how I treat it. It's not necessarily meant to be that warming thing. It's off-putting because of how polarizing it has been in the last year, especially. Extremely political in the last decade, and so it's not necessarily a safe place for really trying to be vulnerable. But then where TikTok would have been like the strongest opportunity there, but that's where you still have Instagram stories more than anything. So understanding the different platforms and how to market and leverage those is critical to reaching the right audiences. If I need to reach the parents, then I'm going on Facebook. If I need to reach peer students, then I'm going to go on Instagram, TikTok, if I had it. If I need to talk about, state boards or governing boards or these types of things, then I'm going on Twitter. And if I need to find the sponsors or donors or alumni, oftentimes I'm on LinkedIn. And leveraging the brand through all those platforms, not me directly, but the actual OU ECCI or esports brands. And so it can't be just post on everything. It needs to be targeted. It needs to be strategic. It needs to be planned and intentional and objective oriented. If you want to see some type of reverse return on the investment. An investment for me isn't money exclusively. It's time. Time is money as well. And so if I want to take the time to put something on Facebook, then what's going to be the return? If it's just talking about student spotlights, that's great, because parents seeing their students is an amazing way to get attention. Students seeing their peer students also being highlighted on an OU, licensed and endorsed departmental page, also important. On Twitter, sure, it's okay. But what more importantly there is, hey, here's an article that we put out, or here is how we did competition this week, or here's a new podcast or a new documentary that we released, stuff like that, which allows us to, again, throw more darts at the board in the comparison matrix of building a way to value our program versus someone else's, which helps our presidents understand what's important and what's not, on top of their own cultural needs for the campus itself and the university. So the biggest one, though, when we talk about social media or communications tools, is going to naturally be Discord. Making yourself available and accessible is a double-edged sword. Just, a lot of directors in the collegiate space get burnt out really, really fast because we're asked the world of us. And for many of us, and my trajectory is absolutely that path, I do not wish this journey on anybody. I wish the journey that I'm leading up to on everybody, however. Like when we get to that point of having that plateau, where coming in and having a well-vetted job description and a well-vetted series of processes that you can take over and further evolve and polish and have efficiency, versus creating everything from scratch. So that's why I, again, still think that we're still beta phase in 1.0 era, not 2.0 yet. But that's where being available on Discord is surrendering your time even further to now people that are not the one that are issuing you your check or telling you what they value. And it can't be as simple as or as naive as saying, oh, we got 4 students recruited to the university, and the university is going to come back and be like, well, yeah, that's what you're supposed to do. Whereas you thought it was a big deal, and they did. Yeah. They think that that's an expectation. And so it's about expectations in general. And so I take that from my time at Apple, where a large portion of the onboarding is managing expectations. You can manage and diffuse a lot of situations if you have the right expectations. If you sit there, and we all do it, we overthink about this next event we're going to go to, this con, or I'm going to meet these different people. You finally meet them, and you meet your heroes, which is one of the worst things you can ever do. Meet your heroes, and you're sorely let down because they're just a human, and you might meet them on a bad day, or they might meet them on a day where a week that they're off. And it's going to leave a bad taste in your mouth, and you've built up all this energy and preamble, and then you just get dropped on your face, and it's not a great feeling. So having some connectivity is more about, I think, connecting with the teachers and those conferences that are putting the work in to create that kind of, spider web of connectivity in the state. So in Oklahoma, we have one giant league that's over 270 high schools, over 40 or 50 middle schools now, and now is producing elementary programming as well. And so being available into that to the coaches level means that, hey, I'm going to make a direct call to action to the coaches that says, if you need anything from the University of Oklahoma, DM me. And whatever you need, we will find a way to provide it. If you have a great student that you want to introduce, then let the coaches, again, be the advocates instead of trying to sort through the sea of a bunch of amazing students. But just like when you're applying to college, that community service, extracurriculars, your grades as a collective are what help you get accepted into universities. And that means that you have to speak up. You have to be your own cheerleader. You have to be your own spokesperson to an extent. And yes, we need to mentor young minds and young students to become professionals, but there still has to be drive. And if there's not ambition, I can't create ambition. What I can do is inspire people to understand that this is what they can do. And through that, and through the set of tools, they can create their own toolbox. But it's no singular tool that is the cure-all. The degree is just one tool in the box. The program is just one tool in the box. It's your job to cultivate the toolbox and the collection of tools that you need for the path that you choose. Do you need that 10 millimeter? You probably need 3 of those because we always lose those. You need a couple different size wrenches. You need a couple of different sizes of special tools. And that's my job, is to help provide the understanding that these are the tools that I have available. These are the tools that I can teach you. Do these tools make sense on what you choose to become and what you want to do with your life? And if the answer is, especially for a 17-year-old, 18-year-old, I don't know what I want to do, that's perfectly fine. However, you should at very well at least know that you do want to go to school. And if you do want to go to school, this is at least where I want to start. I don't know very many students anymore that start in one degree and end in the same degree without at least a tweak to the minor at the very least, or a delay by a semester, if not a year, or a complete degree shift. And for some students, a multitude of degree shifts. In fact, one of my first graduate assistants, I think degree shifted 4 times. And now he is in a GA getting paid to be a part of our program and lead the charge on the competitive side, and is actually teaching before he even finishes his master's degree now, and is already on his pathway to getting his PhD once that master's concludes here at the end of this calendar year. So that's the whole point of college, is to discover who you're going to be and who you want to be through the exposure of different tools that say, this makes sense. I like this. I would enjoy doing this, versus I'm just going to go study really, really hard and never mingle or never do anything outside of the things that I already know. And then at that point, you still retain one dimensionality, which is not the point of college. The point of the university should be to be multifaceted, to be a Swiss Army knife, especially in your undergrad, unless you're going into that medical field or that law degree. But if you're business, there's all kinds of business. If you're in IT, are you network? Are you troubleshooting? Are you database? Are you, cybersecurity? If you're in education, is it post-education? Is it K-12? Is it youth? Is it special? Is it this? If you're in anthropology, which kind of communities are you studying? Is it sociology? Which kind of social norms are you studying? And the goal is to expose you to all the types so that you can fine-tune it.
No, Mike, that is so important. And one thing I know we're getting short on time, but I want to allow you to do, because I think, again, a lot of the audience, right, I feel like will be students, right, who are looking at programs. I remember being in this position, and I'm looking at directors at certain programs and trying to find videos online about, okay, how their programs run. I just want you to take a couple of minutes or however long you want and really, talk to potential students, right? Talk to a student who may be watching this, right? And this could be a great opportunity for you to plug your program, sure, right? Essentially, if I'm a student and I'm watching this, right, and I'm interested, what should I do, right? What steps should I be taking, right? Because as you know, it is that open, right? There is no formal official process for a student. Do I hit you up on Twitter? Does that make sense, sure, right? Sure. What do directors want to hear? What is a process, a quick process that a student go through? And someone like you would be like, hey, this is a guy who's on it. So it makes sense. I would love to end with that. And you can even end with talking about, hey, this is something we could do at our program, and here's what we could offer at our program for students who may be watching this for you.
Sure. So I'll start from the student perspective first. If you're looking for a school, and I'm a big advocate of not everyone needs to go to school. Find your purpose. Don't just accrue debt. That is the worst decision ever. Find the purpose. Be intentional. Be objective oriented. And you don't have to have the entire answer. However, you need to have the want. If you don't have the want, don't just do it because everyone else is doing it, period. Do not just be the trend follower. Don't do that. Second of all, if you reach out to any program, any director, anybody that looks like they're affiliated with the program, especially if they're like on a website like ou.edu for us, and they're listed as being a point of contact, or anybody who has their face in a directory and they don't respond to you, that pretty much tells you everything about that program without you having to ask any other further questions. And I would not try to sell yourself on a program more so than the people are interested in taking you in. Let them sell you on that program. If I allowed the nature of a 130-year-old institution and a flagship of a state to just rest on its laurels and say, oh, we're OU, of course we're OU, we're going to be the best, we're OU, that doesn't tell me anything. This is another era, this is another chapter, this is another expansion of OU. And it has to prove everything the same way that OU had to prove itself over a century plus of execution. We don't get any passes. It does get a little bit easier because we have all that brand to build upon. However, that does not give us excuse. In fact, it should be more critical of the schools, because they should theoretically have more resources as designed by those state agencies and state governments to infuse those flagships to be flagships. So understand that perspective, and understand that if you reach out to a director, please also be patient. We're tired. We're worn thin. We absolutely care about your interest. And at the very least, we're going to direct you to the right people within our channels. But it's not instantaneous all the time. And most of the times it's not. However, if a director or any form of leadership that's identified within a Discord or through email or whatever means you reach out to, socials are absolutely encouraged too. And they don't respond to you at all, they're kind of telling you everything you need to know. For the university side, from the program side, it's really hard to explain entrepreneurship when you're a small business owner and starting something from scratch. It's really hard, and not very many people can relate to it unless you're in those same scenarios and situations yourself. But the best way to think about it, without trying to just completely intimidate you, is to think about an empty field where you have absolutely no terrain except a grass field. There's no paths. There's just grass. There's no footsteps. There's just you in the middle of the field. Which direction do you start? That's what this was like. You have no bearing. The sun is literally over your head straight up. It's not east or west. It's right above you. There's no shadow because it's right above you. There's no paths. Which is your first step? And the correct answer is any step is the correct step. Because if you don't get started, it'll never happen. And everything takes time. So you take one step here, you hit a wall. Well, guess what? You still have 359 degrees of change that you can still attempt. Have you tried all 360 degrees in the radius? If the answer is no, go try again. And that's not for the faint of heart. That is not for those with weak spirits. Those are not for those. And granted, I was impatient when I started with this. I'm definitely more patient now, or at least I know how to restrain it. And it was really critical to be important. It is really, really critical to be patient, understand, and learn the process of the establishment you're trying to build it within. If I'm building it in a 133-year-old university, I think it is now, I have to understand 133 years of its history as best I can, because that'll help me understand how the machine got to this point, how the strings work, how the gears twist, their ratios, who's the responsible people. And the other component of that is don't be afraid of no. No is a liberating thing that says that this degree of your 360 radius is a wall so that you can shift and pivot this way. But in the first ones, and I don't recommend this entirely, but take it with a grain of salt and adapt it to your own style. Somebody telling me no does not mean it can't happen. Somebody telling me no is just freeing me from caring about what they think, because they've been invited to the project, but they declined the offer. The other part, the second half, is the grace. And if you don't do this, this is where it'll hurt you. When you finally prove your point, and you finally get to that point where you immediately knee-jerk to, see, I told you so, eliminate that vocabulary from your mouth, because you need them now. They bought in. They're ready to be a part of it. And if you say, I told you so, and you don't allow them to be a part of it, then now you've shot yourself in the foot, because not everyone's going to value the things that you care about, and they're not going to value it and so forth. Yes, it's like, oh, I did all the work and now you're going to take the glory. No, they're not, because you built something that can't be replicated. You built something that can't just be handed the keys over and expect it to be a smooth transition. But you're going to hit plateaus, and those plateaus are hard to leap off of, especially when you have multiple plateaus. And so you have to be able to delegate, have to be able to offload and put responsibility back into the different areas on a college campus where they belong, meaning that I should not have to be doing admissions and recruitment aside from the program specifics. So that means I should be partnering with admissions and recruitment. I should not be trying to recruit for the College of Journalism. I should be infusing the College of Journalism with new narratives and new topics to be able to discuss, to entice their already student populations that they speak to, the different schools or school districts or the different regions that they recruit from. I shouldn't have to just be the one-man show representing the entire University of Oklahoma with an esports program. And so understanding that hearing a no from somebody in a position of power does not mean stop. It just means continue on. And when you get those moments of success, bring it back to the table, feel the water. If they're ready to bite, let them in, because then you're building allies and building bridges to get further advance your program. And then the last thing that I'll say is from the university perspective, like the actual, not department, but the university administration perspective. Being realistic is important, and managing those expectations, going back to it. Again, the universities, especially the bigger universities, have 5,000 things in the fire at the same time, especially if they're a big athletics component or they have a lot of national merit scholars. For us, we have a contract with NASA. We have a National Weather Center as part of our meteorology program. the second highest rated journalism school in the nation by BEA or Broadcast Awards. There's all kinds of things that require split focus. These colleges, for all intents and purposes, are almost like siloed businesses within themselves. And that's also a controversial thing, how a provost and a dean of students or a president will help unify or segment or allow silos to happen or break down certain things. That's all part of the politics of the university landscape. But you have to understand that whatever you're pitching is not important. It's not. It's just not. And the way that you make it important is by understanding the way they speak, the policies that they make, and then building your program to speak the exact same dialect of the English that they speak on campus. And if you cannot translate between their understanding of what a deliverable is, what they consider success, then you're never going to have it, because you're building something that is a foreign object on the university surface versus something that is speaking the same language of the motion of the university already. You have a train in motion. The only way to jump on that train without ripping your limbs off is to match its speed. What is the mission statement? What is the academic affairs policy? What does the student handbook read? What is the legal due course for certain things, licensing limitations, so that when you're presenting those meetings, you're not ill-informed, you're as informed as can be with what you have available, but you're also already catching up to the speed of that train. And then the thing that I think everybody can appreciate just in general communications is, do not start a DM please with, hey, can I ask you a question? If you're in a program or if you have peers on campuses or people that you've talked to before, hey, are you busy right now? Just ask it. If I'm busy, I'm not going to respond. Once I am, I will. And a large portion of that is because, again, thinking about the attention span of how we've gotten with digital devices, we're down to like 3 or 4 seconds of attention span at max. Yep. And so if you ask that question and I respond 5 seconds later, which has happened, and then you don't respond till an hour later, now it's almost like playing the new form of phone tag. So instead, ask the question so that I can dump the answer, and we can.
That's so important.
And that way we can have productive and result-producing conversations.
Mike, that is so important, and I appreciate you so much. And for the viewers, especially new directors understanding this, I just want you guys to know this level of structure, right? This level of dedication, it's not going to come from your pay, right? It is not going to come from wanting to play video games, right? It's really going to come from a dedication to students, right? So if you're hearing this and you're going, that is so big, that is so large, how am I going to do all this? He's telling you he started the same way. It's dedicated. You start somewhere, right? So I think it's important to say that, because this sounds like a lot to people, right? I'm sure you've been in a position and you've said, this is how I structure my program, and they go, right? And it's important to start somewhere, but it's really dedication at the end of the day, right? And I want to make that very clear. Something else I want to say, right, Mike, I appreciate you guys for taking your time. For the viewers, speaking of recruitment, right, it is a very complicated process. And so you guys know, at Esportian, that's what we do, right? We essentially help students with that recruitment. We will work with someone like Mike and help him and make his bandwidth easier, because we'll work with the administration. We'll help with that placement process, right? So just letting you guys know we exist. But Mike, I appreciate you, man, for taking your time. I hope you have a good rest of your day, and I appreciate the conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome.